Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Delegate Corner. I'm your host, Sinkas, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Jengajojo. Jenga is a member of the DAO Stewards group from BanklessDAO, which participates in governance and optimism. He has some very interesting thoughts to share in regards to optimism governance, so let's dive into it. Hello, Jenga, and welcome to Delegate Corner. Glad to have you on the show.
Thanks for hosting and glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, just let's dive into it immediately and get to know you a little bit more. So, if you want, just take it away and let us know, who you are, how you got into crypto, and why we're here.
Sure. Yeah, long story. Crypto, I started dabbling in 2017, wasn't really very active in that 19 bear market, but really got into it like 2020 COVID onwards. I still remember the markets went down like 70% in like whatever few weeks. And I was like, okay, it's the same thing that happens to my crypto portfolio. So why am I wasting my time with traditional markets? But then that like trigger helped me like do research about like what this is and what is like also going on in the world outside. And like the overarching idea I was thinking about is like really what is the relationship between the individual and the state, and like what are the boundaries that we as a society, like what are we testing with this whole pandemic experiment, and what is like the way out of like this situation, or if someone wants to hedge, like how can they hedge. And then crypto was a very natural fit, and at the same time this whole DeFi summer happened, so a lot of things like weaved themselves together, and then I was like, okay, now I'm like fully in, like I'm not going out till I figure this thing out. And like over the years that I've been as most people do, start with like dabbling with crypto, like trying to make some money, but then eventually they figure out this more than just a casino that's going on. And yeah, since 2021, I've been working in DAOs full time. Started with BanklessDAO and then found my way to some other DAOs, including Optimism. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I got into crypto. Um, about the name, the pseudonym actually. So this is very interesting. What I figured out about like the crypto community in general is that unlike the legacy systems, in crypto you can be who you want to be, and perhaps that allows you to demonstrate your whole personality, your entire personality, as opposed to your partial personality that you would bring to like a professional network like LinkedIn or whatever your Web2 job. But in crypto, like the pseudonymous industry allows you to bring your whole self out there. And then I was thinking, okay, what name should I choose? I wanted it something like simple so that people all around the world can use it or pronounce it, but at the same time, like something interesting. So like Jenga, if you know, like the game is this game where you arrange all these wooden bricks one on top of the other, and then you try to remove bricks from the bottom part of the building and put them on the top, and you play this thing in turns, where ultimately someone removes the wrong brick and the whole thing falls off, and then you start the game again. And I found like this is like a great analogy to how life, society, civilizations work, right? Like you start with the base, eventually with time, players mess up that base a little bit, and then the whole thing collapses, and then you start with the new thing all over again. So I was like, yeah, Jenga sort of fits these categories, and so yeah, I started with that as my name. But yeah, that's a bit about me. Hope that was enough for an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, had thought that when I first saw your name, I thought maybe it's Jenga the game, but I thought no, it might be something different. But yeah, I actually enjoy Jenga as well, and you can draw a parallel sometimes with like the markets in crypto, where some suddenly they just collapse and you have to kind of like start building again. But
Exactly.
awesome introduction. And what are your interests in the space apart from DAOs? You mentioned that you worked full time into DAOs in 2021, but I assume as others you didn't necessarily join the space through DAOs directly. So what are some other things or areas of interest in crypto in general?
Yeah, I mean, I joined like many others to make some money. I do like have like a part-time thing outside my Web2 work. That's what like brought me in, and I think many people who even go down the rabbit hole to like work and like do this full time still continue trading on the side or whatever you consider trading is. So that continues nonetheless. But then over time, what I realized, like as an industry, we had built a great casino online, but we have yet to find like a use case that actually like helps people. And that's when I fell down like this public goods area of the industry, because I think that is perhaps like the most important use case or thing that we could do to help the world in general. Also, on the other hand, like if we look at legacy systems, especially the legal system, the 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 legacy systems, they do implement and enforce contracts, but that's not why the general population respects or wants to trust the legacy system. It's mostly because they fund education, they fund healthcare, they build roads and all these things. And like, if you have a conversation with an army about these things, they would usually point to the public goods that the legacy system funds. And then that is why they need a state, let's say. So in crypto, like if we are trying to build better systems, it's great that with smart contract platforms, we're able to build like better ways to build and enforce contracts. But many normies are not attracted to like this value proposition. However, this public goods value proposition is very attractive, and I believe that is like the ultimate way to onboard lots and lots of people, because that it's easily explainable. So that with crypto, we're able to fund like everything from open source software to things that are in real life, and perhaps infrastructure in real life in the future, in decades to come.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The public goods funding is a great way to onboard people. And I like to say sometimes that if you can't explain the problem that you're solving, and in crypto, it's a big thing that a lot of protocols and projects have to explain the reason they exist. But yeah, if you have to explain the problem you're solving, you haven't found product market fit yet. But I don't. And is it something because public funding and optimism are very much intertwined to an extent, I think, in people's mind. Is that what brought you to optimism, or if not, how did you actually get involved with optimism?
Yeah, actually, that is exactly how I got involved with it. There's also like another part to this. So generally, like building public goods and funding public goods are two different areas. I was mostly involved in building public goods. And then the question came how to fund these public goods. The legacy ways of fundraising from VCs is not something they're interested in. It's hard to like charge fees for doing things that are open source and openly available and then call them public goods. So then, like, what is the third way to fund public goods? And that's where, at least for me, the realization came that DAOs may be the only way that we have to do this, because the whole meme of PGF is quite crypto native, and DAOs are also quite crypto native. So through this, like we, or at least I started getting involved in multiple DAOs across the ecosystem. And the rationale there was like we tried approaching several DAOs and asking for funds to build and fund public goods, but usually you're just going there and asking for money, and it seems like a one-time thing, and it's hard to like demonstrate what is the long-term value that you bring, and especially if you're there like as a newbie, like people do not trust you as much if you've been like a long-time contributor. So this is like one of the reasons why I started getting involved in governance in general in many places, so that would accrue reputation. and then one can leverage that reputation to fund public goods. Optimism was a very natural fit because the ecosystem was already sort of geared towards this idea of funding public goods. However, not all DAOs are sort of geared to this idea. So there, the roadmap is much longer in terms of acquiring reputation and then leveraging it. However, since Optimism, Gitcoin, many other DAOs that have like that as their first priority, it is much easier, and of course is like the community itself and the vibes there are more like you feel like home there because there is others who are also interested in public goods. So yeah, it's quite a natural fit.
Yeah, delegate. I mean, the whole idea of public goods and Optimus, I feel, is like a hive mind. To 100% agree. All right, and you got involved in its governance as a delegate, and I'm curious to know what's your take on what's the hardest thing about being a delegate, either in terms of responsibility or the tools available right now, communication. You know, what's the hardest thing about being involved in governance as a delegate?
I would generally summarize it as sense making. And then there's a lot of chatter about what is sense making. What I would say is like you have to absorb context and make sense of what the current context is and how can you improve the situation. Like that would summarize sense making for me. Um, in case of like some DAOs that are forum only or forum focused, like Optimism, it's not as much context that needs to be absorbed. But then there is some conversation that happens on Discord, and then that can go on endlessly. So there is a lot of context absorption. On the other side of things is like, if you're only a delegate in one DAO, you may be able to do like this very well, sense making very well for that DAO. But on the other hand, you may miss out on learning things that other DAOs have figured out in their journey of decentralization or whatever it is that they wanted to achieve, and how to sort of cross-pollinate these ideas between different DAOs is also perhaps like a key unlock for delegates, and maybe like one of the harder things to do as a delegate.
Right on, and I definitely agree with that point in sense making. I think collectively, some DAOs might have a north star to guide them, but I think delegates individually should also decide what that north star is for them, and that I believe it will help them make decisions, especially when things can kind of like get murky and you don't know how you should decide about a specific decision being made in governance. So definitely agree with your point. Right, and I know that you're not a delegate, you're not representing yourself on in Optimism, but rather BanklessDAO. So I'm curious to also know, you face some specific challenges when you're representing another entity as a delegate. Would you mind talking to us about that?
For sure. So just to give a bit of context here. As I mentioned earlier, I was building public goods in the education space in BanklessDAO. And there we figured out that we are building public goods. There's no fee model for us to fund this. So we have to approach other DAOs to help them see that we are building something valuable here. So we started a meta governance group from the DAO so that we can start doing this. And then the challenge there is that like sure, there is like voting, and B, there is like actual making proposals and talking to delegates and all these finer things. So the voting itself is like delegated to the meta governance group, so all the votes do not escalate to the whole DAO, which happens in some other meta governance groups. Also, the proposal making and the participation, everything is delegated to the meta governance group. So that way, that group has a lot of autonomy. However, like getting that autonomy is part of the governance process of the of BanklessDAO itself. So like navigating those things, what you can say and what you cannot say, and how when you say something, like, is it you that's saying it or is it the DAO that's saying it? Like those are the nuances of representing a DAO, if you were to represent, say, like a more centralized organization, that may be easier because there is like a clear decision-making authority, but the DAO, things can be more fuzzy. What we realized was that things like commenting or like doing your own feedback on existing proposals or things like that is the domain of the individual. But when you're making a proposal to the DAO, it usually involves getting consensus from at least the meta governance group, and if there is others who will be involved in the deliverables, getting consensus from them. So that process is like first getting internal consensus and then seeking consensus from Optimism.
Mm-hmm. Right on. I can relate to some of these challenges because I participate in governance as a representative of L2B, so I have to coordinate with my colleague, and sometimes, yeah, the line can get blurry between is it me that I'm saying something, or is it kind of like on behalf of L2B in my case. But yes, I will definitely relate to those problems. All right, and I can think of responsibility and accountability as some of the core values a delegate must have when participating in governance. But what are, in your opinion, some other values that one could have or should have to do a good work as a delegate, either when representing themselves, when representing another entity?
Yeah, I'd say two things usually for me are priority. One is transparency. Like as we said before, like some of these lines can get fuzzy and the incentives can get mixed up. However, as long as the delegate or the delegation group is just transparent, upfront, and honest about these challenges, it's much easier to address any potential drama that may arise in the future, as opposed to like first having the drama happen and then having to disclose things. So I would definitely vote for transparency. The second thing I would say is to try to play positive sum games with other delegates, as opposed to like forwarding like your own agenda individually, and yeah, like not being collaborative enough, right? I would say like collaboration is the first like the first approach that delegates should have.
Mhm. Awesome. 100% agree, by the way. And when it comes to the practical side, apart from values or more intangible things, what are some practical examples you could think of that makes the job of a delegate either easier or more in line with what you would suggest is a successful delegate or a good delegate, if we may call them that way?
Yeah, I would say the now it depends on if you're an individual delegate or a delegation group. Um, for this, I would stick to like delegation group. The delegation group usually, in my opinion, needs to do some sort of a regular homework on the DAO that their delegates at, either like after key meetings or on a weekly sync. That's what we do. So as to keep themselves up to date on what is happening, especially some of the important points, but also how can that delegate or that delegation group build on these new improvements. Like, for example, in Optimism, there's always new seasons and intents, and then there are updates about these intents, and the frameworks keep getting updated each season. So then the question comes that how can this delegate group leverage this information, and then what are the sorts of proposals that the delegate group can make in order to improve the DAO. So I would say practically, of course, there are basic things such as voting and communicating rationale. Or we personally put them in the scope of governance operations. And then the scope of making proposals, speaking with delegates, and keeping yourself up to date with governance, like that is the scope of governance strategy. And these are like, at least in our case, clearly defined, and there's a clear responsible for who is leading which part.
Mm-hmm. Got you. And what about when you're making decisions? Do you have like a specific framework? In your case, since you're kind of like a group of delegates, do you have to like vote internally and reach consensus, How do you go about like making the decisions?
Yeah, so as I said, we got the permission from BanklessDAO via governance to make decisions inside the delegation group as opposed to escalating everything to the DAO. I recommend this approach for anyone who wants to do a meta governance group in a DAO. Makes things much more efficient and much more focused. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, usually there isn't enough time, like if you even want to escalate things to a DAO to like get everyone's opinion, vote, and then communicate that vote elsewhere. So yeah, keeping things inside the delegation group definitely helps. Second is that whenever we want to make a decision, we always look at the code of conduct, like in terms of compliance. That's what we figured out over the last few seasons, that okay, we can make decisions based on our values, but then what is the other compliance that we need to have? That is the code of conduct. Outside that, there in other DAOs we have like a framework for including and excluding assets inside protocols, but in case of Optimism, that is not clear yet. What are these things? I do believe this law of chains would be interesting, and that would require us to have some sort of a framework to implement. But yeah, no, otherwise it's values and code of conduct.
Awesome. Yeah, and I kind of like share a similar approach where I check for conflicts and everything, both with like code of conduct or the governance process in general, and of course for like the context of each individual proposal as well. Right, and taking it a step back with a more general approach in governance in Optimus specifically, what do you think, or how do you view our current state as Optimism? Like, what are some things that you think we're strong at, some things that we're lacking, some things that we should experiment more with? Do you have anything on your mind?
Yeah, definitely. So I've after being like active in like many DAOs that are out there, I would say like the approach of governance in Optimism is quite advanced for the scale um, uh, of the DAO, as well as like the size of the treasury and things like that. So of course there may be smaller DAOs that may be more decentralized and functional, but then managing like this much scale takes a bit of effort. So what I liked about the way Optimism is doing it right now is a lot of these things initially started as foundation driven, and even now they're quite foundation driven. So this is like a good approach, in my opinion, as opposed to like starting completely decentralized and then trying to figure it out, because usually that ends up in some sort of centralization efforts to then again decentralize. So in that way, I really like the approach that the foundation took. I would say it's like quite advanced in terms of governance itself. What I would like to see or suggest, I would say, in terms of improvement, is now we have, as a DAO, many of these groups, sovereign groups, let's say, that have authority over certain decisions, such as grants, such as code of conduct. Now there's a developer advisory, and probably 5 more groups in the next season. Now, I would say we need to define on a higher level, like the group type, and then allow the DAO to spin out more groups inside that group type, as opposed to like having several different group types, and then it becomes like hard for the DAO to understand like, okay, what is this group and what is the difference between this group and that group. So those things become fuzzy unless there's like a higher level structure. What this could be is like one higher level structure is like types of groups that have no authority to disperse funds. That is like one type of group. The other type of group is the group that only works on like external protocols and their compliance and things like that. So generally, like this delegation by or governance by delegation is the is the way that many legacy governance structures have also evolved. And legacy, we already know the limits of delegated governance. We have seen that eventually it leads to some sort of governance capture. So I am afraid on one hand that will be an inevitable consequence of doing this type of governance. But hey, we are speedrunning the history of coordination. So we may encounter the same limits as the legacy system, and that's great from the point of view of learning for the whole community. And as an experiment, we can demonstrate to the whole world, see, we've run this experiment from 0 to here, and we've come up to like the same problems. Then the question is like, what is the next set of solutions for this problem? To put it in like tech terms, usually when there's a new technology, the first instances of using that technology are skeuomorphic. As an example, when the internet first came about, the newspaper companies put their newspaper online. This is like a skeuomorphic design. But then came social media, who had an internet native way of dispersing information, and that is a non-skeuomorphic way of doing things. So today, with governance, we are doing pretty much similar. We are taking the legacy systems and trying to replicate them on chain. But then we will reach limits of these legacy systems and find completely new ways, novel ways, non-skeuomorphic ways of doing things.
A lot of valuable insights there. And I definitely agree with the idea of trying to define the different structures that we have. For example, I always wondered what's the difference between a commission, a committee, council, a board, and a subgroup, and or a working group or a sub DAO. So yeah, trying to define those kinds of groups would actually, I can see how that could be really helpful. And yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of changes are coming in season 5. New councils and boards are being introduced. What is something that you're looking forward to in season 5?
To be honest, like the recent way RPGF was distributed was an interesting case of like how to do these sorts of distributions. So on one hand, while I am excited to see like more decentralization efforts happening, essentially it's trying to run the same model of delegated governance. How the innovation I see is like from RPGF 1 to 2 to 3, like we have experimented so many times with like allocation methodologies, and I'm sure we will experiment even more in 4 and 5 and so on and so forth. So I'm really excited to see the innovation around this.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of discussion around RPGF3 and its allocation method. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing the new iterations as well. All right, and we've talked a little bit about where we are now and where we have been, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on where we are going as a DAO. Like, how do you see Optimism DAO in the next 2 to 5 years? And what is your opinion, the biggest challenge we'll have to face in order to get to where you're envisioning us being?
Yeah, I would say the vision that I see is that DAO is an actual DAO in the sense that the foundation is dissolved. All operations that are required are done completely remotely, completely online. And yeah, that would like take us much closer to being censorship resistant as opposed to the existing structure. Of course, that does not remove the fact that we need to figure out sequencers and fork groups and all that, but those are still like milestones on decentralization. The final milestone, and for me as a delegate of DAOs, is like DAOs are supposed to be like these internet native forms of organizing communities, projects, businesses, whatever you want to call it. And can we actually get there? The only other example I see is MakerDAO, that has done like this whole roadmap, and now they're completely on-chain, internet native. There's no foundation. Can we also get there as Optimism DAO? I'm quite confident based on the caliber of talent that is in the DAO, that is in the foundation, that we will reach there. In terms of challenges, the biggest challenge I always think of when it comes to governance is how do we resist governance capture? And yeah, I don't know. Like I have yet to see a model where like it's provable that we are able to resist governance capture. What I like about it is that subtraction mindset is like one of the core Ethereum values. So I do believe that people working in this direction are thinking hard about this problem, and eventually we will be able to solve it.
Yeah, definitely I agree. And I think at least a way to mitigate the potential threat of governance capture is to more participants in governance, like more delegates being actively involved and not letting the decisions being made by kind of like a select few. And speaking of delegates, what is like a delegate that you think is very active in the collective and does contribute a lot, but is not as recognized as they should be in terms of like voting power that they have delegated to them?
Yeah, good question. I actually don't know. Like we ourselves have only like 50,000 OP or slightly less than that in terms of voting power. Um, but yeah, we are still in the top 100, or we're like 99 now. So I would vouch for DAO Stewards if that is like a delegate you're looking at who has low voting weight, but has a lot of experience from people working in building public goods, but also from people who are active in several DAOs and are participating in governance there.
Awesome. And all right, making the question a little bit easier and less specific, what is a delegate that you'd like to see on the podcast next, regardless, of course, of their like the voting power that they have?
Have you actually, as L2 Beat, been on a podcast yourself?
I've invited Christoph, my colleague, who represents L2Beat as much as I do. So in theory, yes. Like
Hmm.
we haven't done like both of us being as L2B because I wouldn't have a host to host the podcast. But
Yeah.
yes, to an extent we have done L2B.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I really like the work that you all do. Also, you're a public goods company, so that way, like, it's super interesting to see that you're also active in several layer two governance DAOs. Um, yeah, no, I don't have like a specific recommendation. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. Don't worry. All right. So then, going even more broadly, is there anybody in the collective that you'd like to give a shout out to? Be that a delegate, builder, somebody from the foundation, whoever it is that's contributing to the collective, and you just like to recognize them for the work and hopefully make their day when they hear this.
Yeah, for sure. I really am impressed by the way Justine is leading the governance conversation in the foundation, the work that she has published open source on the research that has been done. There is very few governance talents like her, and incredibly grateful to have her with us.
Absolutely, yeah. Justine's a real one when it comes to governance. All right, and to close things for today, can if somebody wanted to keep up with you, but also with like the delegation of BanklessDAO and Optimism, where should they do so? Do you have like a Twitter link, or do you have delegate communication thread in the forums? Where should one keep up with you guys?
Yeah, so me personally, I have a Twitter, Jengajojo, as well as the BanklessDAO group. We also have a Twitter. It's called DAO Stewards, DAO Stewards. Yeah, and then you can, if you want to be more closely involved, a BanklessDAO is an education DAO. So actually, you can join the BanklessDAO Discord, navigate to the channel where DAO Stewards is, and like actually participate in the discussions, join our weekly meetings, and learn how to do this yourself.
Awesome, that's nice, and hopefully some people take you up on that and actually show up and learn how to participate and actually participate in the end. And yes, of course, I'll have the links in the description for everybody interested, so they can quickly find them. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, Jenga. I think you had some great insights to share, especially when it comes to like the overall vision of the collective and the governance as it is in current DAO. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks a lot for hosting, and glad to chat with you.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody else for listening in.